The rain had fallen on Thurlow since noon and had not once eased. The yard of the Blackthorn Inn was a shallow lake, and the cobbles beneath it could not be seen. Aloan Cray stood under the arch of the stable passage and made herself small against the wet stone. She had walked since dusk. She was 11 miles from Nettlebridge, where the shop had been. She was 4 miles from any door where a person would have known her face. She was 1 morning from a wedding she had not agreed to. She counted the coaches. There were 4. 9 years at her father's bench had taught her where a floor creaks and where it does not, and that a person who does not move is very nearly a person who is not there. She was thinking about which coach, and how long she could hold on beneath it, when the voice came across the yard. It said her name. It did not shout. That was the thing that turned her blood to water. It said her name the way a man says the name of a horse he expects to come to him. And it said it again with the same flat courtesy, and she knew that voice better than she knew her own. She moved. The 4th coach stood apart near the far wall, dark, unlit, the horses already in harness. She crossed the flooded yard, bent almost double. The iron step took the skin off the heel of her hand, and she did not stop. Behind her, a lantern swung out from the inn door. She got the door open. Her left shoe came off in the flood, and she left it and pulled herself in and shut the door with both hands so that it would not clap. The inside of the coach was black and warm, and it smelled of leather and cold ash and something clean underneath. She was not alone in it. She knew before she saw. She knew it from the silence, which was the silence of a room with a person in it, and not of a room without one. A shape sat in the far corner, still unstartled, and 2 eyes in the dark were already looking at her. She had not screamed all night, and she did not begin now. The lantern was crossing the yard. She could hear boots in the water, and the voice, closer, still calm, asking the ostler about a girl with dark hair and a gray shawl. She went forward onto her knees and put her torn hand on the seat beside the stranger's knee and spoke into the small space between them, low and fast and steady. "Pretend I am your wife," she said. "Just drive." He did not answer. "They will look in every coach in this yard. They will not look long in yours. Say I am your wife. Say we are late. Tell your man to go, and I will be gone from your life before the next milestone. I am not a thief. I am only late for a wedding. I will not attend." The boots stopped outside. A hand knocked twice on the door. He moved then, one motion, unhurried. He let the window down 2 inches, and the wet air came in, and the lantern light came with it, and fell across the lower half of his face, and no further. "Yes," he said. "Begging your pardon. We are looking for a young woman. Ran off tonight. Dark hair, gray shawl." There was a pause 1 moment longer than Aloan could bear. "My wife and I have been in this carriage since the horses were changed," the stranger said. "We have seen no one. We are already an hour behind, and I do not intend to be too." "Your wife," the man said, "is cold and is tired, and is not to be kept in a wet yard while you describe strangers to her. Good night." He put the window up. He had not raised his voice once, and Aloan understood, kneeling with the water running out of her hair, that she had just heard a man who had never in his life been asked to prove anything. He struck the roof twice with the flat of his hand. The coach lurched. The wheels found the stones, and the whole dark body of it swung out under the arch into the road, and the lantern and the yard and the voice that had said her name so patiently all fell away behind. Aloan stayed on her knees. Her hands began to shake, and then her arms, and then all of her, and the tears came up hot behind her eyes, and she let them come for exactly as long as it took the coach to reach the first bend. Then she stopped them. Crying was for. Afterward, she had not reached afterward. Yet she pulled herself onto the seat opposite and sat with her back straight and her ruined hand closed in her lap. Her eyes had come round to the dark. She could see a traveling rug folded with a precision no servant achieves by accident, and a flat case of black leather with a seal ring lying loose upon it, and the ring caught what light there was and held it. She had bound enough books in fine leather to know the cut of that coat. She saw all of it, and put all of it away. It did not matter what he was. It mattered that the coach was moving. He had not taken his eyes off her. "You have wet my floor," he said at last, "and torn your hand and lost a shoe and told 6 men in a public yard that you are my wife." He let that sit. "I hope you know what you have just spent." They went 8 miles in the dark, and neither of them spoke again. She watched the hedges go by as gray shapes with no detail in them. She listened for horses behind and heard none. Twice she caught herself falling asleep sitting upright, and each time she opened her eyes to find him exactly as he had been, one gloved hand resting on the case beside him, looking out of his own window and not at her, which she understood after a while was a kind of manners. The coach slowed at last and swung into a lit yard and stopped. "Marbury," he said, "there are rooms here. They are clean. You will take one. I have no money. I am aware you have no shoe either." He opened the door himself before the footman reached it. "Do not argue with me in a yard. You have had one conversation in a yard tonight, and it cost you a great deal." She did not argue. She came down the step with one bare foot into the wet, and she walked across that yard with her chin up, as though she had chosen every part of the evening, and she felt him, watching her do it. Inside there was a fire and a woman behind a counter with a face like a closed purse, and the stranger said 4 sentences to her, and the woman's face opened. A room was found, a supper was found, hot water was found. Alowan stood dripping onto flagstones and heard herself described as a lady who had met with an accident on the road, which was a lie so smooth and so complete that she could not think of one word to add to it. Then he was gone. He went back out into the rain without saying goodbye to her, and the door shut, and she heard the wheels go, and that was that the woman came out from behind the counter with a lamp. Her name, she said, was Mrs. Tabitha Lark, and she had run this house 19 years, and would the lady come up before she took a chill? Alowan followed her up the stairs. "You will want dry stockings," Mrs. Lark said. "I have some that were my daughter's. And a fur. And you will want to know that your shoe has gone past finding, and I will not ask you what happened to it, because it is not my business, and because I have seen a great many young women come in out of the rain in my time, and I have learned that the ones worth helping are the ones who do not explain themselves." "Thank you," said Alowan. They came to the door of a small room with a bed and a washstand, and a window with the rain running down it. Mrs. Lark set the lamp on the stand and stood a moment with her hand on the latch. "You will not have seen the lamps on that carriage," she said. "It was dark, and you were wet, and you were not looking. But I saw them when it came under my arch, and I have been looking at that device on Sunday mornings since before you were born." Alowan stood very still. "A heron," Mrs. Lark said, "standing in reeds, and under it a broken chain." "I do not know it." "No. You would not. If you are from over the river, it is Stanmore." She said the word the way people say the name of a mountain that is always on the horizon. "That was the Duke of Stanmore who set you down at my door, and paid for your room, and told me you were a lady who had met with an accident. The rain went on against the window. Somewhere below a door closed and a dog complained about it." "I see," said Alowan. "I do not think you do yet," said Mrs. Lark, not unkindly, "because I will tell you the other half of it, and then I will leave you to your water while it is hot. There is not a soul in 3 counties who does not know that the Duke of Stanmore has no wife. His wife has been 4 years in the ground. Whatever was said in whatever yard you came out of tonight, it was said in front of men with mouths, and it will be in Thurlow by morning, and it will be over the river by Thursday." She lifted the lamp. "So you had best decide before Thursday what it is you are going to be." Alowan did not sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed in another woman's stockings with the blanket around her shoulders, and she watched the fire go down in the little grate, and she thought about the last 7 months, which was as far back as she needed to go. Her father had died in February. Cray had been an engraver and a maker of maps, and a good one, and he had put every shilling that ever came into the shop straight back out again into copper and ink and better tools. And he had died owing a great deal of money to a man named Ephraim Dole. Ephraim Dole was not a wicked man in the way that men are wicked in stories. He did not shout. He was 50 and he was clean, and he attended church twice on Sundays, and he was liked in Nettlebridge for the reason that men with money are always somewhat liked. He held every one of her father's notes. He came to the shop 9 days after the funeral, and he sat down on the customer's bench with his hat on his knee, and he was patient and reasonable, and he explained the whole of it to her aunt as though Elo and herself were not in the room. Then he turned to Elowin at the end and made his offer. He would marry her. On the day of the wedding, every note would go into the fire. The shop would be kept in her father's name over the door, because he understood that such things mattered to a daughter. Her aunt Drusilla would want for nothing until the end of her life. He said it kindly. He said it as a kindness. He said he was not a young man, and he did not expect a young woman to pretend to feelings that would not be there, and he thought it was better to be honest about an arrangement than to dress it up. He was, she thought afterward, entirely honest. That was the worst of it. Her aunt had begun to cry before he finished speaking, and they were not unhappy tears. They were the tears of a woman who has been holding a door shut with her shoulder for 9 days, and has just heard someone offer to hold it for her. Eloan had stood by the press with her hands behind her back, and she had waited until he was done. No, she said. She said it once. She did not raise her voice. She said, I will not be a payment. I would rather owe every penny my father owed until the day I die than be the coin that settles it. Her aunt had wept for 2 days. Her aunt had reasoned and pleaded and finally shouted, which Drusilla Cray had done perhaps 3 times in her whole life. Lowen had gone up to the room over the shop and shut the door, and had not opened it and had not changed her answer. Then the door had opened anyway, in a manner she had not foreseen, because a refusal is only a refusal when it is heard. In April, the plates were sold. In May, the press was sold. In June, the shop was sold with her father's name still painted over it, and Ephraim Dole bought it, because of course he did, and he came to the little rented rooms behind the chandlers where they had gone, and he sat down on a different bench with the same hat on the same knee, and he explained patiently that he had not withdrawn his offer. And Drusilla, who was 61 and frightened, and who had held that door as long as her shoulder would take it, said yes on Elowin's behalf. The banns were read 3 Sundays running. Lowen sat in the pew and heard her own name read out, and did not stand up, because there is no standing up, because a woman of 20 in the year of our Lord who has no money, and no father, and no trade of her own, does not stand up in a church, and there is no law anywhere that will help her if she does. She wrote to the only man she thought might speak for her, a schoolmaster named Silas Wren, who had been kind to her father, and the letter was not answered, and she never learned whether it was because he would not, or because it never reached him. The wedding was set for Michaelmas morning at 9. At 8 on Michaelmas Eve, she had gone out at the back of the chandler's with her mother's shawl and no bag, and she had walked 11 miles in the rain, and she had chosen a coach in a yard at Thurlow because it was dark and unlit, and stood apart from the others. She thought about all of that, sitting on a stranger's bed with a torn hand and one shoe. She thought about it until the fire was nothing but a red seam in the ash. Then she said aloud to the empty room, in the flat voice of a woman reading a figure off a page, I did not refuse a man because I was proud. I refused because I have seen what a woman becomes when she is a debt somebody paid. And she lay down at last and slept for 2 hours. And at 6:15, while it was still dark, somebody knocked at the door. The man at the door was not the Duke. He was perhaps 40, narrow, dressed in dark gray, and he held his hat in both hands before him, in the manner of a man who has been holding hats before himself a very long time. He gave his name as Vosper, steward to the house of Stanmore. He would not come in. He stood in the passage in the candlelight and set 3 things on the table by the door. The first was a purse. The second was a folded paper he described as a character, signed, stating that the bearer had been 10 years in service at Caldmere and had left it without fault, which would open a door for her in any town she chose. The third was a note of passage on the mail coach to Bristol, and Bristol, he observed, was a very long way from Nettlebridge. "His Grace instructs me to say that no answer is required," Vosper said. "He asks nothing. He wishes only that the matter should end tidily, and that you should not be the one to pay for it." Eloan looked at the 3 things on the table. She thought about a room of her own in a strange town where nobody had ever heard her name read from a pulpit. She thought about the purse, which was not small, and which would have kept her a year. Then she thought about a bench in a shop in Nettlebridge, and a man with his hat on his knee, explaining kindly that everything could be settled at once. "Take them away," she said. Vosper did not move. "I beg your pardon. Take them away. The character is a lie, and I will not carry a lie about in my pocket after last night. The passage I would use if I had earned it, and I have not. And the purse you will put back in whatever drawer it came out of, and you will tell His Grace that I asked him for a sentence in the dark, and not for a price, and that I have been bought once already this year by a man who was also very kind about it, and I did not care for the taste." Vosper looked at her a moment. Something went across his face and was gone. "He said you might refuse," he said. "He did not say why now. You know why." Vosper gathered the 3 things without hurry and put them away inside his coat. She heard him speak to Mrs. Lark, below in the outer door, and a horse going out of the yard at a walk and then at a trot. She sat down on the bed and found that her hands had started again. He came himself 3 hours later. Mrs. Lark came up first very fast for a woman of her build, and said only "Parlor, now, and put your hair up, for the love of heaven." Eloan put her hair up. She went down in the dress she had walked 11 miles in, dried stiff at the hem, with a borrowed shoe on one foot that did not fit her. She thought about apologizing for it, and decided she would not. The parlor at Marbury had a low ceiling, and a black beam across the middle of it. He stood with his hat under his arm, and he was too tall for the beam and had to stand slightly to one side of it, and Eloan saw with the first small flare of something that was not fear, that a room could make a duke look awkward. In daylight he was younger than she had assumed, and harder. He had a face that had been arranged a long time ago and left that way. His eyes were the flat brown of river water in autumn, and they went over her once from the hair to the wrong shoe, and came back, and did not comment. "Sit," he said, and then after a beat, "Please." She sat. He did not. "My steward tells me you sent back a purse, a passage, and a written character." "I did." "Why?" "Because a gift that is meant to make me go away is not a gift. It is a fare. I did not care to be paid to leave a place I had not been invited to." She held his eye. "And because I do not think you offered it out of unkindness, which is the only reason I am speaking to you civilly." The clock on the mantel worked away at the silence. "You have made this considerably harder than it needed to be," he said. "I am aware. I do not think you are." He set his hat on the table. "So I will tell you plainly, and you may decide what to do with it. Last night, 6 men in the yard of the Blackthorn Inn heard a person in a carriage bearing my arms describe a woman as his wife. By 6 this morning it had reached Thurlow. By tonight it will have crossed the river. By Sunday, it will be in a London drawing room where I am spoken of 4 times a year by people who have never met me, and I do not much care about that part. I care about the other part, which is that there is a man in Nettlebridge named Dole who has posted a description of you and is telling anyone who will listen that you took goods out of a house that was not yours." Eloan sat very still. "I took nothing." "I did not say you took anything. I said he is saying it. His voice did not change at all. A jilted man who says he was jilted is a figure of fun. A man who says he was robbed is a man with a grievance. Mr. Dole appears to have a fine instinct for which of the two he would rather be. Then he is a liar. Yes. He is also owed money and liked in his parish, and he will be believed for a fortnight at least, which is long enough to do the work. He paused. You understand that if I now say in public that the woman in my carriage was a stranger, I hand him everything. You are a woman who ran off in the night into a strange man's carriage, and there is no version of that sentence that does you any good. And if you do not say it, then I have a wife I do not have. Alowan looked at the green window and the shapes of the yard swimming in it. You should have put me out at the first milestone, she said. Yes. He picked up his hat. That thought has occurred to me a great many times since 2 o'clock this morning. She stood, because she found she could not stay sitting. Your Grace, I will say this once. I did a wrong thing to you. I put a lie in your mouth without asking, and I did it because I could not think of anything else, and because I was frightened. And being frightened is a reason, but it is not an excuse. I am sorry for it. I will go to Thurlow myself, and stand in that yard and tell those 6 men that I climbed into an empty carriage and you had never laid eyes on me, and let them make of me what they like. They will make a great deal of you. Yes, and it will not help. They will not believe you, and it will look arranged, and it will make me a man who sent a girl to lie for him. He looked at her then properly, the way a man looks at a page he intends to read all the way down. What is your name? Alowan Cray. He went still. It was a small thing. His hand had been turning the hat and it stopped turning. That was all. She would not have seen it if she had not been looking straight at him. Cray, he said. Yes. The engraver at Nettlebridge, Warwick Cray. My father. Her throat closed, and she made it open again. He is dead. In February. I know he is dead. He set the hat down again. There are 4 maps of the Caldmere land in my library, and he cut every one of them. I sat in that shop 2 hours in the spring before last, while he explained to me at length, and with no regard whatever for who I was, why the surveyor I had employed was a fool. Something moved at the corner of his mouth and did not become anything. He was quite right about the surveyor. Alowan discovered that she was not going to be able to speak for a moment. I did not know, she managed. No, you would not. He took his hat up for the 3rd time. Stay here. Do not go to Thurlow. Do not go anywhere. Mrs. Lark will be paid for the room, and you will not argue with me about that either, because it is not a fare. It is a debt, and it is mine. Par. To whom? He was already at the door. He stopped with his hand on it, and did not turn round. To a man who told me the truth about my surveyor, when he could very easily have taken my money and said nothing. He said, Good morning, Miss Cray. Nothing happened for 4 days. Alowan mended sheets for Mrs. Lark because she could not sit still, and would not be idle in a house she was not paying for. She was good with a needle in the way that people are good with a needle when they have been taught to fold and stitch a signature of paper by hand. Mrs. Lark watched her do a seam and said nothing, and afterward gave her more. She did not ask Mrs. Lark for news, and Mrs. Lark did not offer any. And both understood this to be an arrangement. On the 5th morning, a boy brought a letter. It was on heavy paper, and it bore no seal, only a plain wafer, which she understood at once was deliberate. She read it standing in the yard with the wind pulling at the corner of it. Miss Cray, I have a daughter. Her name is Audley, and she is 9 years old. She has not spoken to a living soul since her mother died, which is now 4 years, and I have had 3 physicians and 2 clergymen give me their opinion of it, and none of the 5 was worth the road they came by. On Tuesday, she was in the passage when Vosper was reporting to me, and she heard him say that a young woman at Marbury had sent back a purse. She has asked me about you every morning since. She asked me 9 times yesterday. She has asked me in a manner I have not heard from her in 4 years, and I find I cannot make her stop, and I find also that I do not want to. I am not asking you for anything on my own account. I am aware that I have nothing to ask with. I am asking whether you would come and sit with a child for an hour. If the answer is no, write no, and I will not ask again, and the arrangement at Marbury stands regardless and is not conditional upon it. Stanmore, that was all of it. There was no line in it about the 6 men, or about Thurlow, or about Ephraim Dole, or about what the county was saying. There was no line in it that made her feel she was being managed. She noticed the absence of all of that, the way one notices a draft stopping. Eloan read it twice in the yard and once more in the passage, and then went and found Mrs. Lark in the scullery. He has asked me to visit his daughter. And you will go. I will go. She folded the letter. Do you know what is in this letter, Mrs. Lark? Nothing. There is nothing in it. He has not offered me a thing, and he has not asked me for a thing, and he has said in so many words that my room here does not depend on my saying yes. And that pleases you. It does more than please me. Eloan looked at the letter in her hand. A man wrote to me in February and offered me a house and a shop, and my aunt's whole comfort for the rest of her life, and every line of it was a hand on my arm. This one has no hand in it anywhere. He has left me the whole of the room to stand in. Mrs. Lark wiped a plate and set it down and picked up another. You have thought a great deal about that letter for a woman who says, there is nothing in it. There is nothing in it, said Eloan. That is the whole of what is in it. Mrs. Lark made a small sound that was not quite a laugh. Wear the gray, she said. I have taken the hem up. The carriage came on Thursday, and it was not the dark, unlit one. It had lamps, and the heron stood in its reeds on both of them, and Eloan understood that this was a statement, and that it had been made on purpose, and that half the road would see it. Caldmere sat at the end of a drive of limes, a mile long. It was built of a pale stone that took the autumn light and held on to it, and it was longer than the whole of Nettlebridge High Street, and there were more windows in the west front alone than in every building she had ever entered in her life. She had rehearsed not being frightened by it on the drive over, twice the way one goes through a page of figures. The rehearsal was of no use whatever. A footman opened the door. A second footman took her shawl as though it were not a thing that had been slept under in a coaching inn, and folded it over his arm, and carried it away somewhere, and she had a small mad moment of wanting to ask where. She went across a hall floor of black and white stone that rang under her borrowed shoes. The sound went up and up into a ceiling she did not look at. There were pictures on the walls of people long dead, all painted by somebody very good, and the place smelled of beeswax and wood smoke and cold flowers, and the cold came up through the stone into the thin sole of the wrong shoe. She thought very clearly, I am a person who binds books, and I am about to be seen for exactly what I am, and there is nothing to be done about it. Then she lifted her chin and followed the footman up the stairs. The room at the top was not grand. That was the first surprise, and it was a considerable one. It was a schoolroom with a low fire and a scuffed floor and a great scarred table under a window, and there were drawings pinned all round the walls at the height of a child's hand, hundreds of them, layered where the wall had run out, and every single one of them was of a thing rather than a person. Gates, bridges, a stable roof, a wall. A girl sat at the table with her back to the door. She was small and dark and very upright, and she had a pen, and she was not using it, and when the footman said, "Miss Cray, Lady Audley," she did not turn round. The footman went out and shut the door. Eloan did not speak. She had been told by 3 physicians and 2 clergymen worth of nobody that this child did not talk, and she had decided somewhere on the drive that she was not going to spend an hour trying to make her. So she walked to the table and looked at what was on it. It was a map, a very bad one. It was a map of a garden drawn in ink, with a wobbling wall and a pond like a spilt egg and a row of trees that had defeated the artist entirely and become a row of small angry shrubs. "Your wall has got away from you," Aloan said. The girl's shoulders came up half an inch. "It is not your hand," Aloan said. "It is your rule. You have been holding it down with your fingers, and it has walked on you. Everybody's does. My father used to say, a straight line is not a thing you draw, it is a thing you allow." She sat down and invited on the bench beside her. "May I?" After a long moment, the girl pushed the pen across the table. Aloan took the rule and set it, and showed her where to put the weight of the hand at the far end, and not the near one. And she drew one line, and it was very straight, and she took her hand away. Otillie looked at the line. Then she took the pen back and drew one herself, and it was almost straight, and she looked at it for some time. "There," said Aloan. "Now you will never have to be told that again as long as you live." The child pulled a fresh sheet toward her and did 4 more. "Now the trees. Trees are where everyone goes wrong. Because everyone tries to draw a tree, and a tree is not a shape. A tree is weight. You do not draw the leaves. You draw where the light is not, and you leave the paper alone everywhere else, and the paper does the rest of it for you. My father used to say that half of engraving is knowing what to keep your hands off." Otillie considered this. Then she leaned over the sheet with her tongue between her teeth and made a small, furious mass of shadow under one side of a shrub, and the shrub stopped being a shrub and became a tree. She sat back and stared at it. They worked. The fire moved down in the grate. Aloan ruled, and the child copied, and after a while Aloan stopped explaining anything at all and simply drew alongside her, which is a different kind of company, and, she suspected, a better one. Once the child put the pen down and pushed the whole sheet across so that Aloan could see what she had done with a bank of U along the bottom, and Aloan looked at it a long moment and said, "That is better than mine." And it was not a kindness, it was true. And the child took the sheet back and looked at it and did not smile with her mouth, but did with the whole of the rest of her face. Some time after that, Aloan heard the door. She did not look up. She knew the quality of that silence now. She kept her eyes on the paper and went on talking quietly about weight and light and where to leave the white alone, and behind her, out of sight of the child, a man stood in a doorway and did not come in and did not speak and did not interrupt, and the extraordinary thing she thought afterward was that he must have known she knew and stayed anyway, and still said nothing. She had been at Caldmere an hour and 10 minutes when Otillie Carrow put down her pen and turned on the bench and looked directly at her for the first time. "Are you going to be my mother?" she said. "No," said Aloan. She said it at once and evenly, because a child who has not spoken in 4 years does not need to be handled. She needs to be answered. "I am a woman who came to show you about lines. That is the whole of what I am doing in this house." She began to set the pen straight in the tray because her hands wanted something. "People have been saying a thing about your father and me that is not true. It is not true. I am sorry it was ever said, and none of it is your doing, and none of it is his." Otillie thought about that. "But you might be," she said. "I might be a great many things. So might you. That is not the same as being them." She turned round on the bench. "Did you want me to say yes?" The child looked at her for a long moment. "I wanted you to say the true one," she said. Unquote. There was a sound in the doorway, then, very small, of a man taking a breath he had not intended anyone to hear. He was waiting at the foot of the stairs. He said nothing about what he had heard. He asked whether she would give him a quarter of an hour, and took her along a passage into a room that was not a drawing room at all, but a plain, square room, with a desk and 2 chairs and a fire and a great many maps. 4 of them were her father's. She knew his cutting the way she would have known his voice. "Sit," he said. "In this room you will call me Ansel, and I will call you Eloan, and outside it we will both be whatever the world requires. I am not doing that to be familiar. I am doing it because I am going to say something to you, and I would rather you heard it from a man than from a rank." She sat down. "Then, say it." The purse was despicable. Eloan looked up. "I want that said plainly. Because you were civil about it, and I do not deserve civility for it. I wrote the instruction myself at 4 in the morning, and I knew exactly what it was. It was not care. It was tidiness. I wanted the thing gone, and I wanted to tell myself I had been generous about it." He was looking at the fire and not at her. "You sent it back, and my steward came home and told me so. And I sat in this room an hour, and I was not angry. I was ashamed. I am not often ashamed. It was instructive. You might have said nothing at all, yes. That has been my method a considerable time." He turned the ring on his finger once and stopped. "I will tell you why, and then make you an offer that is not an offer, and then you may go home. I married Isolde Kesteven when I was 24. It was an arrangement. Everybody was pleased. She was a good woman, and I was not unkind to her. And in 11 years, I do not believe I ever once asked her a question and waited for the answer. I asked her things. I did not wait. I would ask, and I would already be halfway to the door, and she would give me the short answer, because the short answer was what there was time for." He stopped. "She was ill 5 months before I understood that she was ill. 5 months, in my own house, at my own table." The fire ticked. "After she died, the child stopped speaking, and every physician who came told me it was grief. And I let them tell me that for 4 years, because grief is a thing that happens to a person and is nobody's fault." He said the next part with no more weight than the rest of it, which was how she knew what it cost. "It is not grief." She stopped speaking because she watched her mother be answered quickly for 11 years, and she drew the obvious conclusion about what talking is worth in this house. Eloan sat with her hands in her lap and did not fill the silence. "So," he said, "that is the man who sent you a purse. May I say something now, please? My Aunt Drusilla was married at 19 to a man who paid my grandfather's debts." She said it steadily. "He was not cruel. I want to be very clear about that, because everybody expects the story to have a monster in it, and it does not. He was decent. He kept every promise he made. He died when she was 40, and left her comfortable, and she has been comfortable ever since, and she has never in her life been able to say the word no to anybody about anything." He looked up. "That is what it does," Eloan said. "It is not that they are unhappy. That is the part nobody tells you." She was grateful. She was grateful for 21 years, every day, at breakfast, and gratitude that goes on that long stops being a feeling and becomes a shape you are bent into. And in February a man came and sat in my father's shop and offered me the same bargain in the same kind voice, and my aunt cried with relief. And I looked at her, crying, and I thought, I know what 40 years of this looks like, because I have been living with it since I was 9. She stopped. She had not meant to say all of that. Ansel Caro did not move for some time. "Thank you," he said at last. "For what? For answering the whole question and not the polite half of it." He stood and put his hand flat on one of her father's maps. "Now, the thing that is not an offer. Audley needs a drawing master. She has needed one for 2 years, and I have not found one, because the ones who come are frightened of me and teach her nothing. You will come twice a week. You will be paid the same wage I would pay a man, which is £30 the year, and you will be paid whether she speaks or does not. And, separately from that, and only if it suits you, I should like to have the Caldmere survey cut again properly, because the 4 on this wall are 20 years old, and 3 of the field names on them are wrong, and I would rather it were done by a Cray than by anybody else in England." That is a great deal of not an offer. It is work, and it is paid, and you may stop it in an hour or in a year, and no other thing in your life will change if you do." He turned round. "And I will give you my word on one point, and I will keep it. I will not ask you for anything on my own account. Not now, not in the spring, not ever, unless you tell me to. You came into my carriage asking for one sentence, and I have watched you refuse every single thing offered to you since, and I have no intention of becoming one more man in a chair with his hat on his knee." Eloan looked at the maps on the wall for a long moment. "Tuesdays and Fridays," she said. It was a strange autumn, and then a stranger winter. She came on Tuesdays and Fridays. The carriage fetched her from Marbury with a heron on both lamps, because he had decided that hiding it would look like hiding, and would be worse, and she came up the black and white hall in a gray dress that Mrs. Lark had let out at the shoulder. And after the 4th week the footman stopped taking her shawl away and hung it on a peg by the schoolroom stair instead, which she took to be the single greatest compliment she had ever received. He was never in the schoolroom. That was the arrangement, and neither of them had ever spoken it aloud. But things began to appear on the scarred table between one Tuesday and the next. A better rule, brass-edged, with the maker's stamp still bright. A jar of ink of a quality she had not held since her father died, which she uncorked and smelled and had to go and stand at the window about. A boxwood block, cut square and true, with a note beside it in a hand she now knew, saying only, "She has been drawing the stable roof for 4 years, and it is time she cut it." And underneath, in the same hand, and smaller, the field between the two spinneys is called Gallowgate on the old map, and Gallowsgate on the new one. And I have found a rent roll from before. Either it is Galleygate. It was a boat. There has not been water in that valley since the conquest, and somebody has been mispronouncing a boat for 800 years. I thought you would want to know. Eloan read that note 4 times, and then wrote on the back of it, "Then somebody should put it right," and left it on the table, and it was gone on Friday. And on the following Tuesday there was a rent roll from the reign of Edward III lying open on the map chest with a marker in it. That was how it went. They did not correspond, exactly. They passed notes about boundary stones and old spellings, and where a lane had been moved in 1790 and why. She wrote to him about a marsh name, and he wrote back a page and a half about drainage. Once she wrote 4 lines about the way the light came into the schoolroom in December, and he did not answer that one at all for a fortnight, and then sent a single sentence, saying he had gone up to look at it, and she was right. She was paid her £30 a year in quarters, and she banked every penny of the first quarter with Mrs. Lark's man in Marbury, and refused, twice, to have the carriage wait for her while she did it. And Ottilie Carrow began, by degrees, to talk, not all at once, and not to everyone. She spoke to Eloan from the 2nd Tuesday. She spoke to Vosper in November 1 sentence, about a horse, and Vosper came out of the schoolroom passage and had to stop and stand for a moment with his hand on the wall. In December she asked a footman for more coal, and the footman, who was 19 and had been at Caldmere since he was 12, brought so much coal that the room was unbearable for 2 days and nobody said a word about it. Her father she spoke to on the 11th of December, at dinner, having not addressed him directly in 4 years, to tell him that he was wrong about where the icehouse was. Eloan heard about that one from Mrs. Lark, who had it from the carrier, who had it from the kitchen. She sat down in the scullery when she heard it, and put her hand over her mouth. "Well," said Mrs. Lark. "Well," said Eloan. "And what are you going to do about the rest of it?" "There is no rest of it," Mrs. Lark went on with the plates. Eloan took her shawl and went out and walked the length of the Marbury Road in the cold and thought about it properly. Once, the way she made herself think about money. She was 20. He was 39. He was the Duke of Stanmore, and she was a dead engraver's daughter with a borrowed shoe in the cupboard upstairs, and there was a man in Nettlebridge saying she was a thief, and there was a whole county that had already decided what she was, and had decided it in the yard of an inn in the rain. He had given her his word. He would not ask. He had meant it. He was not a man who said things he did not mean. And that was precisely the trouble, because it meant the word would hold for the rest of both their lives. There was a feeling in her chest with a name on it, and she looked at the name and put it back where it came from. She could not afford it. That was all. It was not tragic. It was arithmetic. She turned round at the milestone and walked back to Marbury and did not think about it again for a month, which was, she would admit much later, the largest lie she ever told herself. Silas Wren came on the 4th of January. Alawan was in the yard beating a rug when the gig came in, and she looked up and knew him before she had any right to, because he had the same long, stooped shape he had had across her father's shop counter when she was 16. "You did not answer my letter," she said. "It came out before she could arrange it." "I did not receive your letter." He got down stiffly. He had been driving a long time. "Miss Cray, I received nothing. I have been 3 months finding out where you were. May we sit somewhere, because I have 2 things to tell you, and neither of them is a comfortable thing to say standing in a yard." They sat in the parlor with the black beam, which was becoming, she reflected, the room in which she was told things. Mrs. Lark brought bread and went away again without being asked to, which was her particular genius. "The first," said Silas Wren. "On Michaelmas morning I was in the vestry at Nettlebridge at 8:30. I had ridden from Cowley in the dark. A former pupil of mine at Nettlebridge wrote to tell me the banns were being called, and I went. I was there to speak against the marriage, and I had the curate's ear, and I had a letter from your father, written the summer before he died, in which he says in his own hand that he would not have you bound to Dole for any money on earth." He put his hands on his knees. "You were already gone. I was 1 hour late, and I have thought about that hour every day since Alawan could not speak. Your father asked me when he was ill to look out for you. I did it badly. I want that said." He looked at the fire. "The second thing is worse, and I will say it quickly. Ephraim Dole has sworn an information before the magistrate at Thurlow. There is to be an examination on the 22nd. He is saying you took goods to the value of £9 out of the rooms behind the chandlers, and he has a list, and your aunt has put her name to it. The room went a long way away and came back. Drusilla signed it. Drusilla is 61 and living in his house on his charity, and she signed what was put in front of her. I do not think you should hate her for it. I also do not think you will be able to help it for a while, and I would not insult you by telling you to try." Wren rubbed his eyes. "He does not expect to win it. That is what you must understand. He expects to lose it and to have it printed. A woman who is examined is a woman who has been examined forever, whatever the outcome. And what am I to do? That is the third thing, and I said there were 2, and I lied." He sat forward. "Marry me!" Alawan stared at him. "I am 41. I have a schoolhouse, and £120 a year, and no expectations of any kind. I am not going to pretend to you that this is a grand passion, and I am not going to pretend it is nothing either, because I thought about you a great deal more than a man of my age should think about a girl who used to sit on her father's counter correcting my Latin." He said it plainly and without self-pity. "But this is not chiefly about my feelings. Listen to the practical part. If you stand in that room on the 22nd as Miss Cray, who was in a duke's carriage, they will destroy you and enjoy it. If you stand there as Mrs. Wren of the schoolhouse at Cowley, married a fortnight, they will have nothing. A schoolmaster's wife is a dull thing, and a dull thing cannot be printed. The county will forgive me, and it will forgive you along with me, because you will be mine, and it will not be interesting. You would take that on the talk. All of it. I would take it on, and in 3 years nobody would remember, and you would have a house and a name and a door that locks." He met her eyes. "And I would be decent to you every day of my life. I can promise that one absolutely. I cannot promise you anything else." The fire went on burning. It was, Elowen thought, the single kindest offer any human being had ever made to her. And she sat in the parlor at Marbury with a good man looking at her hopefully, and she understood with a terrible cold clarity that if she said yes, she would spend the next 40 years being grateful. She asked him for a week. He gave it to her without an argument, which somehow made it worse. On the 6th day, a carriage came to Marbury that she did not know, and a servant she did not know handed down a card. And the card said that the Dowager Countess of Wexhall would receive Miss Cray at Caldmere at 3. Elowen turned the card over. There was nothing on the back. "Whose house is she receiving me in?" she said. "Her late daughter's," said Mrs. Lark, "which she will consider the same thing. Go, and go tidy, and do not let her give you the chair with the light in your face." Lady Sabina Kesteven was 70 and straight-backed, and dressed in the sort of black that is not mourning, but habit. She received Elowen in a long, cold room on the north side that Elowen had never entered, and she did not stand, and she indicated a chair with the window behind it. Elowen sat in the other one. Something in the old woman's face registered that and set it aside. "You are smaller than I expected," she said. "I am told that often. You will not be told it much longer. Sit still and listen to me, Miss Cray, because I am going to do you the discourtesy of being honest, and you will not get honesty anywhere else in this county before the 22nd. She poured tea for them both. Her hand was perfectly steady. My daughter Isolde was married in that chapel at the end of the west wing. She was 23. She was, I am told, content. Lady Sabina set the pot down. She died in the room above the one we are sitting in, and there were 4 servants and a physician in the house, and no one at all in the room, because it was 3 in the morning, and she had not wanted to make a fuss. That is what my daughter's life came to. She had not wanted to make a fuss. Elowen did not touch her tea. So you will understand that I have a certain interest in the woman who comes next, and that my interest is not romantic." She looked up. "Now, you will not marry my son-in-law. He has not asked me. He will." She said it flatly, as a fact of weather. "He has been a stone for 4 years, and now he writes notes about field names to a girl at a coaching inn, and he has put his arms on the lamps of the carriage that fetches her, which is a thing a man does when he has already decided and has not admitted it to himself yet. He will ask you in the spring, and you must say no, and I will tell you the 4 reasons, and you will find you cannot answer any of them. You will be examined on the 22nd. Whatever the finding, you will have been examined, and it will be in a printed sheet within a month, and it will be attached to your name for 50 years. That is 1. You have no money, no family that will stand up for you, and 1 aunt who has already put her name to a paper against you. That is 2. You cannot run a house of this size. You do not know 1 soul who will receive you, and every woman within 40 miles will make it her business to see that you never learn. That is 3. She paused. And the 4th is the child. Ottilie is 9. In 7 years she will be presented, and she will walk into rooms, and what she will find waiting for her in those rooms is not her father's title. It is her stepmother. She will be the girl whose father married the thief from the inn. That is what she will be called. Not by everyone, and not to her face. And it will not matter, because it will follow her into every room she enters until she is 40, and she will never once be able to answer it. Lady Sabina folded her hands. "You are, I think, fond of her. So I will put it to you as directly as I can. There is 1 person in this house who can protect that child from the whole of that, and it is not her father, and it is not me. It is you, and you can do it by going away." The fire made a small sound. Elowen sat and looked at the tea she had not drunk. She thought about the argument, and she could not find the flaw in it, and that was because there was no flaw in it. Every word of it was true. She had known most of it herself at the milestone on the Marbury Road in December and had walked back and put it away. "Lady Sabina," she said, "may I ask you one question before I answer?" "You may." "Did you ever ask your daughter what she wanted?" The old woman's face did not change at all, but her hand, which had been resting open on the arm of the chair, closed. "That is impertinent. Yes, Isolde was content." "You said that you were told she was content." Aloin's voice was very quiet. "That is not the same sentence, and you are far too clever a woman not to know it." The clock in the corner went on with what it was doing. "I am not going to pretend you are wrong about the rest," Eloin said. "You are not wrong. I have thought about every one of your 4 reasons for longer than you have, because I have thought about them at night, and you have thought about them in a carriage. I know what I am, I know what he is. I have known both since a woman with a lamp told me on a landing at Marbury. But I will not be told by you what I may read, and what I may answer, and where I may go on a Tuesday. If he asks me, I will give him my own answer, and it may well be no, and it will be no, for my reasons and not for yours. And if I do go away, it will be because I decided it sitting somewhere by myself, and not because a woman I met once at 3 o'clock told me it would be tidier." She stood. "Sit down, Miss Cray. No, thank you for the tea." She had not drunk any of it. "I am sorry about your daughter. I mean that. I think you loved her very much, and I think you have never once forgiven yourself. And I do not believe you should, and I would not say either of those things to you if you had not just spent a quarter of an hour telling me the truth." She walked the length of the long, cold room, and out of it, and down the great stair, and her legs did not begin until she reached the gravel, and then they began very badly indeed, and she got into the carriage before anyone could see, and she sat with her hands flat on her knees all 8 miles to Marbury, and did not cry. The lesson stopped, not by anybody's decision that she was ever shown. On the Tuesday a note came from Vosper, correct and regretful, saying that on advice of counsel, and until the matter at Thurlow was concluded, it was thought best that Miss Cray should not attend at Caldmere, and that her quarter would be paid in full regardless, that his Grace hoped she would understand. There was nothing in the note in his own hand. Eloin turned it over twice looking for it, and caught herself doing it, and put it in the fire. Eloin wrote to Silas Wren the same afternoon and refused him. She did it properly. She did not soften it, and she did not leave a door ajar for her own comfort, because she thought that a man who had ridden through the dark to stand in a vestry for her deserved a clean answer. She wrote that she was refusing him for the worst possible reason, which was that his offer was good, and that if she took it, she would spend her life thanking him for it, and that no man of any decency should be married to a woman who is thanking him. He wrote back within 3 days, and his letter was 4 lines long, and the last line said, "I would rather be refused honestly by you than accepted gratefully by anyone, and I will be in that room on the 22nd, whether you like it or not." She counted the days after that, which she knew perfectly well was a foolish occupation, and did anyway. 2 days, no word from Caldmere. 4 days, no word. 7 days, no word. On the 11th day, she took the shawl and walked, and found she had walked toward Thurlow, and stopped and went on anyway. The yard of the Blackthorn Inn on a bright, cold January afternoon is a small place. That was the first thing. It was a yard with a pump in it and a dung heap and 20 paces of cobble from the arch to the stable wall, and it was not a lake, and there was an old man mending a trace by the door, and the whole enormous night of Michaelmas Eve had happened in a space the size of her father's shop. She stood where the 4th coach had stood. There is a version of this, she thought, in which she went into the 3rd coach instead, or under it, and was found by the men with the lantern, and was married on Michaelmas morning at 9, and would be 4 months into it now, and beginning to be grateful. She stood in the cold, and could not make herself sorry for a single thing she had done, and could not make the arithmetic come out either. He had given his word he would not ask, and she had wanted him to keep it, and he had kept it, and now she understood that she had wanted him to keep it the way one wants a door locked from the inside. The other possibility she made herself look at squarely, standing there because she had never once in her life let herself off a thing by not looking at it. It was that Lady Sabina had gone from Marbury to Codmere and set out the 4 reasons in that long, cold room, and he had listened and had found, as Eloan herself had found, that there was no flaw in any of them. That was not cruelty. It would not even be a decision. It would simply be a clever man arriving at the correct answer and putting a girl aside quietly, the way a great house puts anything aside. The old man with the trace looked up. "Lost something, miss?" "No," said Eloan. "I left something here in the autumn. I only wanted to see where." She walked back to Marbury in the dark, and the frost came down, and she did not cry that day either. And that, she thought, was becoming a bad habit. The examination was held in the long room over the assize house at Thurlow on the 22nd of January, and it lasted 50 minutes. Eloan went alone. 3 separate people had told her she should not. She went alone, because if she arrived with a Duke's attorney at her elbow, then every person in that room would have their answer before anybody opened his mouth. Ephraim Dole had a list of 9 pounds of goods. He read it out in his patient, kind voice. A copper saucepan, a pair of brass candlesticks, a worked shawl, a quantity of linen. He was very sorry to bring it. He said he had hoped it would not come to this. She answered every item, and she answered it flatly. And she had the ledger. That was the thing nobody had expected, because nobody had thought about what an engraver's daughter does with her hands. She had kept her father's day book for 4 years, and had gone on keeping the household book after he died, in her own hand, in ink, dated, every entry, because that was how she had been raised. Every item on Dole's list was in it, bought and paid for out of her mother's marriage money before ever the shop was sold, with the shop it came from, and the day and the price, the shawl she had brought with her. She put it on the table and said that it had been her mother's, and that it was in the inventory of her mother's things which the parish had, and that it was the only object in the room she cared about, and that Mr. Dole was welcome to try to take it. The magistrate looked at the ledger for a long time. Ephraim Dole stood with his hat in his hands, and Eloan watched the exact moment he understood that he had done the one thing a careful man must never do, which was to be seen trying. It was dismissed. She walked out past Silas Wren, who was at the back with his arms folded, and he said nothing, only inclined his head as though she had conjugated something correctly, and she got out into the air, and found that the whole town knew, and that being looked at is not always the same as being condemned. She went into the yard of the Blackthorn Inn, because it was the nearest place to stand. She had been there 10 minutes when she heard a horse come in fast under the arch. He had ridden from Caldmere. The horse was blowing and dark at the neck, and he came off it before it had properly stopped, and his coat was wrong for the weather, and his hair had not been near a brush, and he had, she saw, not shaved. "They sent to me at 11, he said. "I have come from the North Field. It was dismissed, I know. I met the clerk on the road. He stood in the middle of the yard, breathing. You went alone." "Yes. You went alone, and you did not send to me." "No. Why?" "Because if you had been in that room, it would have been your victory," said Eloan. "And I have spent a year having other people settle things on my behalf, and I found I would rather do this one myself." Ansel Carow stood in the yard where she had knelt in the flooded dark, and he shut his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them he did not come any closer. "I am not here to ask you anything," he said. "I want that understood before. Another word. I gave you my word in October, and I have kept it, and I intend to go on keeping it. I did not write in December, because I did not trust what I would write, and I will not send you a letter that pretends nothing is happening. Something is happening. It has been happening since a schoolroom in November, and I have said nothing about it because I have no right to say anything about it, and I am telling you that now only. so that you do not spend the rest of the winter thinking that I stop. Your mother-in-law came to see me. I know. She told me. She told me every word. His jaw moved. She is right about the printed sheet, and she is right about the county, and she is right that a house like mine will make a study of you. I have not one argument against any of it. And the fourth reason, the child. That is the only one I have thought about. He said it very quietly, and I have thought about it for 6 days, and here is what I have. My daughter did not speak for 4 years. She speaks now. She speaks because a woman came into a schoolroom and answered her question truthfully, when it would have been very much easier to be kind. Whatever my daughter meets in a room in 7 years, she will meet it able to say something back, and she was not able to do that in September. He stopped. I would rather send her out into the world with a voice and a rumor than silent and unblemished. That is my answer, and it is my answer as her father, and it is the only thing in this business I am entirely certain of. The old man with the trace had prudently gone inside. "May I say something now?" said Eloin, "please. I have been standing in this yard on and off for a fortnight trying to make a sum come out." Her voice was not quite steady, and she let it not be. "I told you in October about my aunt. I told you I would not be a woman who spends 40 years being grateful. I have said that to myself so many times that I stopped hearing it, and about 6 days ago I finally heard it properly, and I found I had got it wrong. I was never refusing to be married. I was refusing to be owed. Those are not the same thing, and I have been treating them as the same thing since February." She looked at him. "Silas Wren asked me to marry him on the 4th of January. He is a good man. He would have been decent to me every day of his life. And it would have saved me from every single thing that old woman listed, and I refused him, and I did not refuse him because of his station, or his age, or his schoolhouse. I refused him because he would have been rescuing me, and I would have known it, and I would have said thank you at breakfast for 40 years, and I am not rescuing you." "You are not rescuing me because you did not," said Eloin. "You had 100 chances. You sent a purse, and I sent it back, and you never sent another one. You could have stood in that room today and had it over in 9 minutes, and instead you were in the North Field, because you had given me your word, and you kept it while it cost you. And do you understand that there is not one other man in England who would have?" He did not move. "I do not know how to be a duchess," she said. "I do not know one useful thing about it. I do not know whether I can stand what they will say, and I do not know whether her mother will ever look at me without seeing her. There is a very great deal I do not know. There is a great deal I do not know either, but I know that I walked to Thurlow 11 days ago, and I was not sad about Thurlow." She stopped. She made herself finish it. "You told me you would not ask. You are keeping your word. So I am telling you that you may stop keeping it." The horse pulled at a weed between the cobbles. Somewhere in the inn a door banged. "Eloin Cray," he said. "Will you marry me?" "Wilt, yes." He crossed the yard. He did not take hold of her, and he did not kiss her. He stopped a pace short, which was by then so entirely characteristic of him that she nearly laughed, and he lifted her right hand and turned it over and opened it, and looked at the heel of her palm where there was a white seam of scar 4 months old in the shape of an iron carriage step. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he closed her fingers over it and gave her the hand back. "You should have that seen to," he said. "It healed in October." "Yes," said Ansel Caro. "I know exactly when it healed." They were married in the 3rd week of March at the parish church at Marbury, which held 90 people and had never in 400 years held more than 60. Mrs. Tabitha Lark wept, without any dignity whatever from the first word to the last. Vosper stood at the back with his hat in both hands, and was observed, by one footman, to be smiling. Silas Wren came, and shook Eloin's hand at the door, and said he had brought the register of Cowley's school to show her a boy who was better at Latin than she had been at the same age, and would not be drawn on any other subject, and left before the cake. Drusilla Cray was not there. 2 letters had come back unopened. It would be 2 years before that door opened, and it did open. But that belongs elsewhere. Lady Sabina Kesteven came. She sat in the 4th pew in her habitual black, and gave nothing to the proceedings at all. Afterward, in the vestry, she stopped in front of Eloan and looked at her for an uncomfortable length of time. "I asked her once," she said. "I sold. On the morning of her wedding I asked her whether she was content, and she said yes. And I have thought since January about how long I waited for the answer, and the honest figure is that I did not wait at all." I had my hand on the door. Her mouth was perfectly level. "I do not withdraw a single one of the 4 reasons. Every one of them will happen to you. I expect so. You did not let me have the last word in my daughter's house, and I have not decided whether I forgive it." She drew on her gloves. "But it appears I am obliged to be your relation. I shall be a very great deal of use to you, and you will not enjoy any of it." She was not warm. She was never warm. But the printed sheet Ephraim Dole had been so confident of never appeared, and Eloan never learned why. And at an assembly at Bath the following November a woman made a remark about coaching inns within Lady Sabina's hearing, and was cut so comprehensively that she left the county in the spring. The other thing happened in June. Eloan went back to Nettlebridge for the first time, on foot from the crossroads, because she wanted to arrive in the town the way she had left it. And she went to the yard behind the old shop where Jory Pengelly, who had been her father's pressman for 19 years and now worked for nobody, kept a shed and a great deal of opinion. They sat on upturned crates and drank tea that was mostly not tea. "There is a thing I have been saving up to tell you," Pengelly said, "and I have been saving it a year, and I will tell it badly. The sale. The June sale, when Dole cleared the shop. I was not there. No, you were not, and I was, and I will tell you what happened. The plates went first. 4 of them, the Coldmere survey, and the whole room knew what they were worth, and the whole room knew there was nobody in Nettlebridge who could pay it. And there was a man at the back, a dealer, out of Bristol by his coat, and he had them at £90 and never blinked. And then he had your father's gravers, all 40 of them in the roll at a price that was frankly indecent, and then he had the little press. And then he went away, and nobody ever saw him again." Eloan had gone very still on the crate. "I asked the auctioneer that night who had the buying of it," said Pengelly. "He told me Bristol, and he told me it twice. And he told it in the way a man tells you a thing he has been paid to tell you. I let it alone, because it was none of mine. But I saw that gig go out of the town, and it did not turn for Bristol. It turned north over the river. The bees went about the yard. That was last June." Eloan said the 11th. He had not met me. He had never heard of me. My father had been dead 4 months, and I was 3 months from ever climbing into anything. "That is right," said Jory Pengelly. "And that is why I saved it up. A man who does a kindness for a woman he wants is doing what anybody would do. A man who buys a dead engraver's tools at an indecent price, so they are not broken up for the metal, when there is nobody living he needs to impress by it, is a different article altogether. And I thought you had a right to know which one you had got." She did not go home and ask him. She went home and said nothing, and waited 9 days, and went and looked, and they were in the 3rd room off the estate office, in a crate under a piece of oilcloth, the roll of gravers on top and the 4 plates standing on their edges in the straw. She mentioned it in October by the fire, with the rain on the tall windows and Ottilie upstairs asleep. "Ansel, there is a crate in the estate office. There are a good many crates in the estate office." He did not look up from what he was reading. "There is a roll of 40 gravers in one of them, with my father's initials filed into the tang of every one. I bought some tools at a sale." "You paid £90 for 4 plates you already owned the survey of. They were well cut," he said. "It would have been vandalism. You told the auctioneer to say Bristol. He turned a page. He was not reading it, and they both knew he was not reading it. It seemed simpler, he said. Elowen looked at him for a while. She had learned by then that this was the whole of what she was going to get, and that pressing him would not produce more of it, but less, and that a man who cannot say a thing out loud in a warm room can still be told that it was heard.
"Thank you,"
she said. He looked up, then he looked at her the way he had looked at her across a parlor with a black beam in it, when he learned whose daughter she was, but without the guard on it.
"You are welcome,"
he said, and went back to his book, and she sat with her tea and watched the fire, and let him. The map was finished in the spring after that. It took 14 months, and it hangs in the estate office at Caldmere to this day, and the field between the two spinneys is called Gallygate on it, correctly, for the first time in 800 years. Audley pulled the first proof herself. She was 11, and had been cutting for 2 years, and was already better at engrain than her stepmother had been at 15. In the cartouche at the bottom right, in a lettering hand still learning itself, the plate says that it was drawn and cut by Audley Carow and Elowen Carow. She had cut that line in the last week alone, and told nobody. She handed the wet proof across the scarred table and went to wash her hands, did not stay to watch it read. Elowen had to set it down because her hands were not going to be reliable. She never made a speech about it. That was not what the house was for. She went to Thurlow once more, years later, on a hot day in July with the dust standing in the air. The Blackthorn had a new landlord and a new pump, and the arch was the same. She stood by the stable wall where the fourth coach had stood, and found she was not moved by it in the way she had expected. It was a yard. It had always been a yard. The enormous thing had not happened here. It had happened afterward, in a parlor, in a schoolroom, in a long, cold room on the north side of a house, across a great many ordinary afternoons in which several people said true things to one another when a false thing would have been very much easier. There was no lightning in it anywhere. She walked out under the arch into the sun, and the carriage was waiting at the end of the lane with the heron on both lamps, and a man was standing at the horse's head talking to it, having got down for no reason at all and with a good half-hour still to wait.